Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And on tonight's episode, we're going to break down the break camp rosters for the Chesapeake Baysox, Aberdeen Ironbirds, and Delmarva Shorebirds before those teams begin their seasons on Friday. We're going to talk about who's on the rosters, some breakout players that you could see along the way, as well as some players who surprisingly are not included on these rosters for reasons that aren't immediately apparent to us. We may learn more as time goes on, and we'll wrap up the discussion on the players that you should watch out as deep sleepers on each team. But I know that this is a lot of things for us to process. And how are you guys getting geared up for this?
Friday's going to be a lot of channel surfing, channel flipping back and forth between these games. But I'm excited. I'm ready for this. Built for this.
Well, I got something that'll help you out because baseball is back in full swing, meaning we are back on the grind, making sure that we can provide coverage of prospects from AAA all the way down to the Dominican Summer League. And to make sure we have the energy and focus to pay attention to it all and put on this production each week, we are continuing our Magic Mind routine. And we want to share that experience with our listeners to let you know that Magic Mind is a mental performance shot that you can take with your morning coffee. It's not a coffee replacement. It's not the quick boost and crash like an energy drink, but a support for your body's natural energy engine. Created with a scientific advisory board of doctors and medical researchers, Magic Mind uses the highest possible grade matcha and organically grown mushrooms that provide safe and effective stress reduction, need a lot of that, and a sense of calmness. And also 5 cents of every bottle sold are used to support mental health charities that help U.S. homeless communities. And they're so confident in their product that they will refund you 100%. No questions asked for up to 100 days after buying if you are not satisfied. And all listeners do have a limited offer that you can use now that gets you 48% off your first subscription or 20% off a one-time purchase with code OTVLT20 at checkout. And you can claim it at www.magicmind.com/OTVLT20.
Certainly a lot for us to digest here tonight. And we'll just start off with Chesapeake Baysox. This club looks to be pretty talented from top to bottom, headlined by what has to be one of the fastest, most defensively steady outfields in the Orioles minor league system, as well as the possible breakout for year two of Year of the Pitcher here at Orioles on the Verge. And you've got a few guys that are repeating the level who might have had strong cases for going up to Norfolk, whether that's Alex Pham, Peter Van Loon, Keegan Gillies, and a few others. But then you also have some pitchers joining the team for the first time that bring an interesting mix and possible breakout potential. Zach Fruit, a guy that got a lot of hype in spring training for how he looked in his major league time in major league camp, and who's coming off a very strong 2024 season at Aberdeen, will make the jump up to AA this year, along with guys like Edgar Portes and Levi Wells. We'll also have Pat Riley for a full season in the Orioles farm system, and Juan Nunez, who is back with the Orioles after being selected by the Padres in last year's Rule 5 draft. We didn't get a chance to talk about this a lot last week, but Nunez was indeed sent back to the Orioles before the season started. And while I don't think the three of us have officially reorganized our list yet, it's safe to say this is probably a top 20, top 25 prospect returning to the system in Nunez. You also have a lot of people's favorite relief pitching breakout candidate this year, Yaki Rivera, and of course Trace Bright, who experience-wise is ready for AAA, but for right now with a little bit of logjam is back at AA. And the logjam is something that I think we're going to be talking about a lot on tonight's episode, but starting with this pitching staff. And Nick, I'll go to you first here. This does seem like a really deep group.
Yeah, we started noting this last season as the season progressed. Like, why are some lower level arms not being moved up? Why is Blake Money so in Delmarva, etc.? It's because of the pitching logjam that was really starting to form last year. It's now a full on traffic jam, and you can see it here in AA. Like, there are going to be arms in AA and below who probably should not be at their respective levels, but they're going to be there a while, I think, this year until trades happen, injuries happen, or guys who just clearly aren't going to cut it get filtered out. But innings are limited at each of these levels, and there are a lot of deserving arms. And if you look at this AA roster, Alex Pham, not Alex, where am I at here? This roster, wrong one. Alex Pham, Edgar Portes, Juan Nunez, Levi Wells, Pat Riley, Peter Van Loon, Preston Johnson, Ryan Long, Trace Bright, Zach Fruit. That's 10 right there. Daniel Lloyd can also give you innings. Pick a night where you want to go down to Bowie. You're not going to get one starter. You could potentially get 2 top 30, certainly 2 top 50 starting pitching prospects in this system going on the same night. Like it's going to be hard to move up in this system, I think. And you look at Chesapeake, this is a perfect example. Why? Like this is loaded. Alex Pham probably shouldn't be there. Keegan Gillis probably shouldn't be there. Dylan Hyde probably shouldn't be there. But how are they going to get the innings in AAA when you look at the AAA roster? So the pitching staff here on this Chesapeake roster is definitely the draw, and it's not going to leave you hanging to find some good pitching here.
The pitching is insane for the Baysox. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. You've got plenty of guys that, like Nick said, could already be in AAA at this point. Luckily, Cameron Weston was given that opportunity first, and I think deservingly so. But even as more guys like Pham and Nunez and whoever, Pat Riley, Trace Bright, you name them, when they do get the chance to move up, they're going to be replaced by guys in Aberdeen that are not going to make the Bowie rotation / piggyback, just pitching staff as a whole, any worse. So yeah, Bowie, it's no better place to highlight the pitching development going on in Birdland than in Bowie / Chesapeake right now. And yeah, that's what I'm tuning in to watch for every single night that there's a minor league ball. I'm checking out the pitching in Bowie at some point.
I know we talked about him a little bit recently when Steve Molesky was on the show, and we talked about Zach Fruit some as well because of how both of those guys looked in big league camp. But it looks like both of them are going to be in kind of those piggyback tandem roles, at least for the beginning of the season. What are you looking for out of those guys to see, like, okay, they are sustaining the breakouts that they showed in camp? Strikeouts are going to be a big thing. Fruit, you're not going to see these guys work 6-7 innings, unfortunately. That would be a lot of fun to watch Zach Fruit, see if he can go 6 innings, see if he can put up a couple quality starts. But unfortunately, this is just how it's going to go at pretty much AA and below. You're going to see a lot of these arms being piggyback like this, but make an impact in those 4 innings, right? Like Zach Fruit, especially, I think there is that cause for not concern, but just the thing to look out for that we've seen with so many arms beforehand. Remember, when a lot of these guys get to AA, there seems to be, and coaches have changed, so the philosophy may change. You're always evolving your pitching development, but the big decrease in strikeout rate, actually, we see with a lot of guys because there's this bigger emphasis to pound the strike zone. Your stuff has to play in the zone. You can't nibble around the edges anymore. These hitters are better. You're certainly not going to be able to do that in AAA or the major leagues. So you start to see these guys live in the strike zone more, and how well does the stuff play? And we saw it with Trace Bright early on last season. He was allowing way more hits, and the strikeouts were way down, but he felt good. Unfortunately, the second half of the season, the walk issue came back, and so we didn't see him take that step forward. But so like that, if you see somebody like Zach Fruit, if you see the strikeout rate dip down, and you're like, what's happening? Give it a couple of weeks, let him adjust. And then if you see that strikeout rate spike again after that in the second half of the season, those are the guys that I think then you really need to pay attention to as guys who are going to probably be successful at the next level.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much just, like you said, the strikeouts to walk ratio, especially Levi Wells, Zach Fruit at this point, after they showed out in spring training, and we know the stuff they're bringing to the table this year coming into the season. And those are 2 guys that you could have justified starting in Aberdeen, to be honest with you. But, well, maybe not Zach Fruit as much, but Levi Wells, I think you could justify starting in Aberdeen. But no, they're in Bowie to start, and I think they're going to be showcasing their stuff in a big way this year. And yeah, I think sky's the limit. And these guys were 2 guys that, they weren't super highly thought of coming into the year, but they've quickly gotten everyone's attention, and I expect that to continue.
Turning our attention to the position players on the Baysox roster, The outfield looks like the strength of this lineup. Enrique Bradfield Jr. headlining a group that includes Douglas Hodo III, as well as Tavian Josenberger and Reed Trimble. As I said a moment ago, they're going to cover a lot of ground in that outfield this season. But you look around the rest of the roster, and there are some interesting names here. 1 through 3, this is a really solid group of catchers with Creed Willems seemingly in a good place offensively, perhaps ready to build on the results that he had in 2024. You have Adam Retzbach and Silas Ardway there as well. And then in the infield, Frederick Bencosme goes back to Bowie this year after an up and down but overall solid 2024 season. And I think we're really hoping that a healthy Max Wagner can break out here. So, Bob, starting with you, what are your thoughts on the group of position players heading to Bowie/Chesapeake this season?
I don't think it's the most exciting group that we're going to talk about tonight. I would say it's probably the least, but it does have some big bright spots. I think Creed Willems is kind of riding under the radar a little bit coming into the year. I think he can continue to build on what he's done the last couple of years. I think the outfield is actually really exciting. Enrique Bradfield Jr., obviously, but Tavian Josenberger and Reed Trimble can kind of be a slightly lesser version of him. And Douglas Hodo has good defense, and let's not forget had a WRC plus around 130 last year combined between all the levels he played at. So nothing to sneeze at. The infield is Frederick Bencosme and a bunch of guys that are trying to do something with their careers. Max Wagner, obviously, a little bit more upside there, but I'm hoping that Bencosme is able to put it all together a little bit more in 2025. But really, it's about the catchers and the outfielders is where my attention is on the position side.
It is the Enrique Bradfield Jr. show with this lineup. He is a star there, and we'll see how that hit tool plays. You know, all the positive reports over the second half of last season. Let's see what he can do across hopefully a shorter time in Double-A this year. But Reed Trimble, we know the story with Reed Trimble. It's when he's on the field and healthy, just like last year, he was phenomenal. He's a very good prospect. He has multiple tools. He's got speed. He's got power. He can play in the dirt. He can play in the outfield. He can do a lot of different things. I almost wonder if you'd see him play some first base or something this year. I'm trying to figure out who plays first base for this team outside of the catcher seeing some first base time. But yeah, the outfield's going to be a lot of fun. You're not going to see a lot of fly balls get dropped out there at Chesapeake this year. In the infield, yeah, it's Servideo getting sent back to Double-A. Carter Young, I don't see a breakout happening with Carter Young this year. Bencosme is tough for me. I think I'm still holding out some hope there just because he seems like an unbelievable person. When he was on the show, I loved that interview, but I just wasn't as impressed with the bat, to be honest, last year. And so I am a lot less optimistic about Bencosme entering the year, if I'm being honest. But Max Wagner, I'm still like, if I'm the only one watching him, so be it. I'm going to do it. I think he deserves one more shot just because he had the hamate bone surgery that wiped out the entire offseason. He had the concussion as soon as he got to Bowie like 2 years ago. And then last year, he never got a chance to play last year because of back injury that ended up shutting him down. He showed the power when he was in Aberdeen. He showed a little bit there. I'm going to give him one more shot. I think Bencosme and Wagner, though, both these guys are well worth watching and paying attention to this year and see if they can have a solid breakout and help improve this lineup.
And we'll go to Aberdeen now, and we'll stick with the position players. There's about as much ceiling as you could hope for in an outfield high A level right here with this group of Jake Cunningham, Vance Honeycutt, Austin O'Byrne, and Thomas Sosa. All four of those players have their own unique question marks, but they all are very athletic, possibly high upside guys. The infield, good group here with Leandro Arias, Anderson De Los Santos, Aaron Estrada, Griff O'Farrell, and Jalen Vasquez. And then with the catchers, Ethan Anderson and Yudis Mordon and Ryan Stafford. I'm going to start with the infielders here because to kind of build off the discussion we had with Bowie. One of the players that I was really wondering if the Orioles were going to be aggressive with going into this season was Aaron Estrada. because it seemed like if they wanted to make the bump up to Double A after what he did at High A last year, they'd probably be justified in doing so. Yes, it's a pretty small sample size, 26 games, 98 plate appearances, but he finished that with a 99 WRC plus, 337 on base percentage, good walk to strikeout numbers. I would guess really the main thing is that we didn't see a ton of extra base hits there. So maybe you want to see a little bit more power at High A, but I feel like he could be a guy that moves up pretty quickly if he's able to get off to a good start this season.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I could see him just being in a mass promotion at some point, along with Vance Honeycutt, Austin O'Verne, Griff O'Farrell. I could see him Ethan Anderson being in that mix that eventually hops up to Double A Bowie at some point, whether it's all at once or spread out a little bit. But yeah, I think he's got to be the leader in the pack as far as where he is compared to his age group than even Leandro Arias. Obviously, Anderson De Los Santos been a little bit disappointing, but we'll see what he can do if he's focusing on first base. Thomas Sosa, I think he's still the guy that's really raw, and he's got to prove that he can put it together. But Estrada's pretty polished already, so I would expect him fully to be in Bowie by the second half of this year.
This whole lineup this is the lineup that I'm most excited to watch of the three, just because there are a billion question marks about these guys, but this is where you're going to find some real breakout potential here is with these Aberdeen bats. Like, is Ethan Anderson, he had some of the best swing decisions and batted ball data among his draft peers last year in that small first ace of pro ball. I'm excited to see how much he plays behind the plate. Although when you look at, Ryan Stafford being there, we know he plays every single position there is. I imagine you see a lot of Ethan Anderson behind the plate. So I'm curious to see if Ethan Anderson, like, that bat comes out hot, does the bat force the issue and get him a bump up to Double A a little bit sooner, or do they keep him back in Aberdeen a little bit longer because they really want to work on the defense? I'm curious to see that. But yeah, Leandro Arias and Aaron Estrada both had good years last year, and this is their next big test. Like, can Arias, that hit tool, carry him up to Double A? And Estrada, are we going to continue to see that power that he showed in Delmarva that I don't think any of us were expecting last year? And yeah, when you look at this outfield, like we talked about with Sosa, it just needs to click. He's shown the strength. It just hasn't resulted in over the fence home runs yet. He showed the speed. He showed the defense. He showed a cannon for an arm. When it clicks, it is going to click, and he's going to be a dangerous prospect in the system. And the same goes for Vance Honeycutt. Like, I still think his ceiling and potential get really underestimated because of all the focus on his weaknesses. Like, Honeycutt's ceiling is a 30-30 Gold Glove winning center fielder. And I don't think that's a stretch at all. There is an extremely long journey for him to get there, but Honeycutt was one of the most explosive college hitters the last 10, 15, 20 years. So if I'm imagining a scenario here where it does click in 2 months, when it clicks for Honeycutt and Sosa, and those guys are batting 2-3 in this Aberdeen lineup, the opponents are going to be begging them to move the fences back in Bowie, because we know that's already a home run hitter's haven. When those two guys get up to Bowie, it's going to be a show. They got to start hitting. They got to start putting it together. But this Aberdeen lineup, yeah, it's if the pieces start clicking here, you're going to see some true breakouts.
Yeah, out of this position player group, I see like 8 or 9 potential major leaguers at some point in their careers. Obviously, it doesn't have to all be with the Orioles, but it's a stacked lineup, and it really just comes down first and foremost to those outfielders like Vance Honeycutt. We finally got some excitement out of him. We got to see him in action this spring training at the breakout game, and it was electric. Austin O'Verne, same thing. Like, these guys, I think, are going to lead the way to a really competitive. I know we don't think wins and losses matter in the minors because they really don't, but I think this team's just going to end up winning a lot of games just because the talent on the field night in and night out is something to behold. And yeah, like I said, Thomas Sosa, he's raw, but let him cook, and he could be something pretty special.
If Honeycutt and Sosa click, this lineup it's just going to be unfair most nights for their opponents. And I really think that O'Farrell, O'Verne, and Anderson are going to come in and settle in at High A quickly. All three of those guys looked good at Delmarva last year. They're college hitters, and they have kind of the right mix that you look for in guys who are going to succeed in this level. They're good strike zone judgment, can take walks, don't strike out a ton. Anderson's probably the one with the most power in that group, but solid hit tools from O'Vernon and O'Farrell. I could see them taking some steps forward this year. Now let's go to the pitching staff. Just because we didn't start with this pitching staff doesn't mean that it's a weakness. In fact, this pitching staff is very good, highlighted by some pitchers who are going back to Aberdeen to begin this season in Michael Ferret, Trey Gibson, and Nestor Herman. And I think with Ferret and Gibson in particular, you could argue that the logjam of pitching in the system is coming into play for the fact that these guys are going back to high A. And they're joined by a group that spent most, if not all of last year in Delmarva, in Braxton Bragg, Juan Rojas, Blake Money, Riley Cooper, among others, who look like they could be reasonable breakout candidates this year. And then Teddy Sharkey, who we thought was going to be one of the most immediate returns from the 2023 draft class last year. It didn't pan out that way because, unfortunately, an early season injury cost him most of 2024, but he'll go back to Aberdeen. Hopefully a healthy 2025 allows him to develop into an electric late-inning reliever that a lot of national outlets believe that he could be. So, and that kind of scratches the surface with this pitching staff, I think. But what are your guys' thoughts?
I think when you're going to have a rotation here of Nestor Herman, Trey Gibson, Michael Ferret as your top three in no particular order there, all three guys deserve to be in Double-A. So they're going to be a lot of fun to watch here in high. And then when you're going to be able to round out this rotation with Blake Money, probably Juan Rojas, maybe. We'll see if he continues to start. Maybe Braxton Bragg gets a start as well. This rotation, just like the lineup, I think this is where you're going to potentially see the real breakouts. Like if Nestor Herman, Gibson, and Ferret, if they had mini breakouts last year, they put themselves on the radar. Now this is the year where do they take that next step? And I want to see which one of these guys, how many of them, just come out of the gates firing, where you're like, why the hell are they still in Aberdeen? They do not deserve to be there. They're overpowering hitters. It's not even fair. I hope at least one of those guys really starts the year in that manner. And in this bullpen, I think the bullpen is very sneakily, except for Teddy Sharkey, because everybody loves Teddy Sharkey. I think the bullpen is very sneakily pretty good. Zane Barnhart is a guy who the data looks really good on. Jared Beck, I don't think we ever talk about enough. He's always a guy where I'm like, yeah, the numbers suck. He can't throw strikes. He's too tall. If he reaches the majors, I think he would be the tallest pitcher ever, I believe. I can't remember. But either way, it's like, he's not that good. And then every time I go back and I look at his numbers, I'm like, oh, he's been really, really good for like the last 2 months. So Beck is going to be super interesting. Riley Cooper, I think, should just be in AAA at this point. I don't know why he needs to be pitching against high A dudes, especially after that spring training he had. So yeah, that's the bullpen is honestly going to be, in my opinion, just as interesting as the rotation here in Aberdeen.
I was going to say, I feel like Riley Cooper really got some shine towards the end of spring training there. Very interested to see what his season looks like. But yeah, again, pitching. It's pretty spectacular. The starters are, I'm sure there will be some piggyback in Aberdeen as well between these guys. And Wyatt Cheney, I think he's missed some time with injury. What do we have here? Wander Los Santos, I think he kind of had a lost season last year. Is he able to bounce back? Ty Weatherly is a guy with great stuff, not always knowing where it's going. But yeah, Teddy Sharkey for me is like the highlight. Like, how quickly can he move up the system this year if they really want to let him loose? Or do they want to play it safe coming back from the injury and have a typical progression? But I feel like he's got the high octane stuff and the attitude where he could end the season in AAA Norfolk's bullpen. It would not be a shock.
I'm glad you guys mentioned Riley Cooper because for anyone had a chance to watch him in big league camp this spring, he looked really good. There was a very nice write-up by Andy Koska in the Baltimore Banner, giving a little bit more background on Cooper. And what's interesting is this was a guy who pitched primarily out of the bullpen at LSU. And last year, the Orioles used him in a hybrid role. Even when he was coming out of the bullpen, he was usually throwing 3+ innings in relief. And the numbers, if you look at what he did in Delmarva last year, he clearly held his own and was solid there, but nothing really jumps off the page. Yet, from watching him a little bit more this spring and from seeing a few of his outings at Delmarva last year, I'm left wondering, could he be one of those guys that you fast track as a reliever, especially if you decide to go the pure relief route where it's an inning or two at a time as opposed to coming in the top of the fifth and pitching until the eighth or ninth inning? What do you guys think? Is that a possibility?
Potential. I mean, you never know. Like it sounded like after the draft that they signed Riley Cooper thinking that he had starter stuff, but just didn't have the opportunity because, I mean, even Blake Money got bumped from that rotation, especially when Paul Skeens came over to LSU. But, like, I don't see Riley Cooper being a starter at any point anymore, although he did start last year with Delmarva. But I do think, especially after what he did in spring training, yeah, why not throw him in the late inning role here in Aberdeen and see if he can be in Bowie in 2 months and in AAA by the end of the year? Because the dude, like, if you read Andy Costco's articles about him, it was a really fun piece in that the dude's different. He's built different mentally. He has that reliever mentality where he's just going to go out and say, I'm better than you. I'm bigger. I'm stronger. And I'm just going to overpower you with my stuff. Here it is. Go hit it. And he was successful in spring. He was really good last year in Delmarva. So I honestly wasn't that high on him at all last year, but after watching what he did this spring, we'll see.
I feel like he could be a more likable Keegan Aiken type in the major leagues potentially. I mean, can either come in and get lefties out in one inning, or if you need someone to go 2 or 3, he could do that as well. I feel like that's where he's headed. But yeah, I'd love to see. I like to see anyone fast tracked. It's always exciting, and especially when you have so many guys that could potentially be starters down the line. You see it in Cleveland with the Guardians. I don't mind developing certain guys as relievers because that can work out and they can help your major league team sooner than you might expect.
This episode brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Shifting a little money here, a little there, and hoping it all works out? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can get a better budgeter and potentially lower your insurance bill too. You tell Progressive what you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll help find you options within your budget. Try it today at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
We'll go down to Delmarva, and we're going to continue on with the theme of pitching here because when you look at the Shorebirds break camp roster, what stands out the most is the pitching staff, which is headlined by one of the biggest, if not the biggest breakout prospect from last season, Keeler Morphe. Morphe had a late season run with the Shorebirds, young right-hander, showed some very impressive stuff, even got an appearance in the Futures game this spring. And then there's also some other possible breakouts in this group, headlined by Eber Cartaya, a guy that we've talked about on here before. Cartaya started off his career with a couple of sluggish seasons in the short season minors, got to Delmarva last summer after a fairly solid run in the Florida Complex League and showed really good stuff. He and Morphe could be headlining this rotation alongside of Chase Alsop, a pick out of Auburn in last year's draft. The national media in particular zeroed in on Alsop as having some really interesting stuff, in particular his fastball. I kind of expected, and I think that the two of you thought the same, that we might see Alsop begin this year in Aberdeen, but he's going to start the season in Delmarva. So I think when you look at this group, and we'll talk about the position players in a minute, but I think when you look at this group, the pitching staff is a clear highlight, and there's some possibly really high power arms among that mix.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I certainly thought that Alsop would be like the next Jackson Ballmeister and start the year in High A Aberdeen. But once you look at that roster, it's like, yeah, I could see where that could be a little bit of a crunch there, just like we've been talking about all night. It's just, especially on the pitching side, it's just there's too much. You have to wait your turn. And I think I don't think Alsop's going to be a guy like Blake Money that spends all season in Delmarva, but he'll be more along the Michael Ferret, Nestor Erman, Trey Gibson's, where second half he'll go up to Aberdeen and hopefully start next year in Bowie. But yeah, him, Keeler Morphe, obviously that's the guy we want to watch. He might have been a little too amped up for that breakout game as the youngest guy there as a pitcher, but he's exciting. Even when he's walking guys, he's exciting. But I can't wait to see him and how fast he can continue to develop during the season. There's, like you said, there's a lot of other guys, Echo Correa, Yaiber Cartaya, Brian Bautista, I think is kind of underrated. And for some reason, I'm thinking that Jacob Cravey, after a not so great debut season, is going to come out and look a lot different, but we'll see what happens there. But yeah, the pitching, and this is where there's a lot of guys that we expected to see on the Delmarva roster, on the pitching staff. Maybe they're ready, but they're just not going to be showing up opening day. Maybe they'll kind of creep their way in as the season goes on. But yeah, again, pitching is pretty great throughout the system.
Yeah, looking at this staff, I'm shocked at it's just weird to see this fleet of like undrafted free agents and not more of the 2024 draft picks here. It's like Joe Glassie, Christian Heberholtz, Kenny Liner, Trent Terzinski, and Ben Vespi were all UDFAs, and they're here in this Delmarva lineup. It's just interesting that we're missing so many 2024 draft arms, and it could be a matter of if there was a tweak and you miss 2 weeks of spring, like it's going to push you back 2 weeks. And like Bob said, you'll be back in 2 weeks and you'll be on the Delmarva roster. Maybe some guys get bumped up to Aberdeen. We'll see. But it is just interesting to see so many draft picks not here and so many UDFAs. But as far as like the rotation goes, you're going to see this Delmarva rotation of Chase Alsop, Keeler Morphe, Yber Cartaya, Asel Correa, and Sebastian Gongora is a guy that I think we're going to be talking about a lot over the next couple of weeks, because he was the 11th round pick out of Louisville, and the velo went down as the season progressed last year when he was at Louisville. But John Muley noted in an off-season chat, and actually I think he posted an article today too, looking at some of the minor league roster stuff. But he noted that Gongora is back up to 97 miles per hour from the left side. So I think that's going to be a really fun name to check out down at Delmarva.
Just a fun name to say as well.
And he's like 6'5". He's a 6'5" lefty who throws 97 miles per hour. Yeah, give me that, please.
Go now to the position players with the Shorebirds. Miguel Rodriguez, a catcher, is one of the highlights here. Rodriguez, a relatively new addition to our top 50 prospect list. A young hitter who seems fairly advanced for his age behind the plate, good power and good walk numbers. I also like Edwin Amparo a lot, who's coming up to full season ball for the first time in his career. In the FCL last year, Amparo showed a lot of power, and although he really did not walk a whole lot, he also rarely struck out. Limited defensive versatility, and there are some questions about where he's going to stick on the diamond, but for now, the 19-year-old shows a pretty interesting plate approach. Meanwhile, you're hoping that Brylan Tavera, who once had the record for the largest bonus of any player signed in the international free agent class by the Orioles, can bounce back after a 2024 season that was really marred by injuries. There's a few other players I think we're waiting to see if they can break out in that group or if they can do the most with this opportunity, as we're going to discuss in a moment. There's some players where we're kind of left scratching our heads where they are to start the season, and Delmarva's positional player slate is one of the areas that seems to have really been affected, along with the pitching staff. But when you look in this group, clearly does not have the headline names that the Ironbirds and Baysox have, but still some interesting players to keep an eye on in the early phases of the season.
Yeah, and if you're just counting numbers on the rosters, they're missing an outfielder. Like every roster has 3 catchers, 6 infielders, 16 pitchers, and 4 outfielders. Delmarva only 3 outfielders, so maybe they just don't know who's going to fill that spot come opening night. Hopefully it's Ellis Cuevas, who I'm like, where are you, Ellis Cuevas? But hopefully he's not injured or at least too badly. But yeah, I think that's correct. I think this is a roster that is just waiting for the FCL season to get underway and kind of over with, so they can, in the second half, bring on all the hotshot prospects out of the FCL, like the Steven Martinez's, the Jordan Sanchez, why can't I remember any of the international guys' names? Emilio Sanchez of the world, all those guys over. So yeah, I think Delmarva is always a balancing act between getting guys their first full season ball and also just like ready to take on the next class as well. So it'll be interesting to see how this roster fluctuates throughout the season for sure.
As far as the hitters go, it is a roster. It is a group of names. I think every year we've done this episode, I feel like we always like, all right, what's the level like when you tune in? Because I don't know how you guys do it, but most nights I feel like this will be a lot less this year with the kids getting older. But typically, you put Orioles up on the big TV, and I've got the iPad or the laptop, and I've got a minor league game on, and I'll watch one live typically. And every year I feel like we've done this show, it's always been like it's Delmarva that I'm watching live that night. I'll catch up on the other stuff, the next morning when I get to work, after I get my work done. But like it's with Delmarva is always because this is where, yes, it's tough some nights to watch, especially since the elimination of short season ball, guys are getting more aggressively pushed here to this level. Some nights it can be extremely tough to watch. Some people, it's high school baseball. Not quite, but it can be as bad. But this is where it's like when you're watching on a nightly basis, it's really good. It's my favorite mental exercise to sit here and watch like, okay, who are the real guys? Who is really standing out as true prospects? Picking those guys out, hyping them up, and seeing if we're right. And I love it when we're able to identify these guys early on in Delmarva, hype them up, and then they finally break out, and we're like, told you, this is a dude. This is the first year, though, where I'm like, I'll catch Delmarva tomorrow, if I'm being honest. Outside, the pitching is going to be a lot of fun, but this lineup is, Miguel Rodriguez is going to hit. He is a fun hitting catcher. Edwin Amparo is a top 50 prospect in our system. I don't know where he's ranked. I think he was like top 35 or so. I had it. I lost it. He's pretty high up our top 50 list. He's going to be a lot of fun. There is an outfielder that I see Zach has noted that will be fun to talk about in a moment. But Kevin Guerrero, is weird to see his name. He was not good though last year. The Tanner Scott Cole Sulser trade lives on. Yeah, I don't know. Are you guys excited about Michael Hernandez? Like genuinely?
Nope. I mean, he did have a great final month of the season last year, so hopefully he can build off it. But excited, I would not say so. Yeah, I think I'm going to be watching a lot of the first 3 to 5 innings of Delmarva games and then flipping over to something else. Because, these starting pitchers, I want to see them. And, I want to see at least some of these guys, how they look in full season ball on the screen. But other than that, I think between Aberdeen and Bowie mostly is where I'm going to be focusing. Yep.
Yeah, an error there in my notes. That was Edwin Amparo, not Felix Amparo on Delmarva's roster. And Amparo, much different profile, a little bit higher rated prospect. Both guys that you should have your eye on, even though Felix Amparo is not going to start this season in Delmarva. Now, let's take a minute to talk about some of the players that aren't on the roster. And just worth noting that we were recording this on Wednesday night. We don't have any more information than what most Orioles fans have right now. We may learn more before the games start up on Friday, but there are some guys missing. We already touched on Ellis Cuevas. Luis De Leon is another notable name who we saw a little bit of in big league camp this year, as well as in the breakout game. He is not on a break camp roster. Carson Dorsey and Christian Rodriguez, among some of the more intriguing arms from the 2024 class, are not on a break camp roster. And Nick, I know you sort of alluded to that a moment ago, that Delmarva's pitching staff has a lot of undrafted free agents in it, as opposed to drafted pitchers from last year's class, even though that was a fairly deep group. So I know that we don't know why that is the case right now, but it's clear that we could see some changes if some of these players hopefully come off or get their season started soon.
Yeah, you're looking at 6 here. I'm looking at, shout out to Yoni in the Patreon chat who put together the full list. I started to do this. I had like 4 names. I'm like, oh, this is cool. All right, well, these guys will probably be in Delmarva soon enough. All right, let's roll with this episode. And here comes Yoni with like 20 names. Like, oh, okay. I missed a lot here. We're looking at 6 drafted pitchers not on a full season roster. Carson Dorsey, like he made an appearance at high A last year. So interested to see. And again, we, like Zach said, we don't know. It could be, if you have the smallest tweak and you're set back a week, well, they're going to keep you in Sarasota for another week. These are just break camp rosters. They will change. Minor league rosters are very fluid. But yeah, Carter Baumler, not on a roster, maybe injured again already. Ree Sharp recovering from Tommy John surgery. You should probably see him later on in the year. Davey Cruz, a name that I know we were excited about in years past, but just he keeps walking way too many guys. It's interesting. Luis De Leon is the big one, though. And that one, it's like, when I'm putting my top 50 list together back in December, it was like it was hard to get excited about Luis De Leon. I'm like, the stuff is still there. You got to rank him higher. But I kept wanting to knock him down some pegs. Unfairly, shouldn't have. Because he comes out in that spring breakout game, like that's the Luis De Leon that we all fell in love with, 2 years ago. And not that he was bad last year, he just didn't take that step forward. And to see him, it was 6-7 pitches, couple ground ball outs, strikeout. You saw the velo, you saw the slider. That's Luis De Leon. But we haven't heard anything since, and now he's not on a full camp roster. That is concerning as well. Hopefully it's nothing major and it was just a small setback, but yeah, we'll see. It'd be nice to get some more information about some of these guys. And I feel like we're very lucky with like the full season injury list that came out like 2 weeks ago. We're like, all right, you're feeling really good. And now it's like, are we feeling that good still when you're seeing these names not on these minor league rosters? But hopefully nothing too serious.
And for that, now we'll dive into the deep sleepers. And this is, of course, part of our last segment, was this last call brought to you by Checker Spot Brewing, located at 1421 Ridgely Street, not far from Camden Yards. Checker Spot is the perfect place for a pre or post-game drink. And while you're at the game, check out the Birdus Award, one of their signature beers, available behind home plate at Oriole Park at Camden Yards this season. Checker Spot Brewing is open 7 days a week. You're going to want to check it out anytime you come to an Orioles game this season. And now we will get into our final segment. And usually during the season, this is where we highlight players outside the top 30% of our top 50. But since we're really not fully into the minor league season just yet, we decided to take a different approach this week and discuss some of the players that we think profile as deep sleepers on each roster. We each went through Chesapeake, Aberdeen's, and Delmarva's rosters and picked one player from each club that we think you should have your eye on this season, even if they're not the biggest name on their roster or among the biggest names. And we'll start off with Bob, who I think from top to bottom has a pretty interesting mix.
Yeah, I went with Douglas Hodo for my AA sleeper. I'm not sure if he's that deep of a sleeper, but like I said, he had a 128 WRC plus last season, over 420 plate appearances between low A, high A, and AA, and in 50 plate appearances in AA, he had a 121 WRC plus, had a pretty solid stint in the Arizona Fall League, can play some good defense at all three positions. So I like him a lot. Daniel Lloyd was kind of my backup there if Douglas Hodo was too obvious of a pick. But I just think Daniel Lloyd was a guy that Matt Blood singled out a year or two ago, and then he dealt with some injuries. So maybe if he's healthy, maybe he can put it together. In Aberdeen, I went with Ty Weatherly because I feel like he's a guy that has the Orioles love. He has great stuff, not always great command of it, but he's also dealt with some injuries here and there. He has not pitched that often. He was an undrafted free agent after the 2023 draft, and then he in 2023 got in 11 and 2/3 innings to a 2.31 ERA, 3.24 FIP. And then last year in low A, he pitched in 35 and 2/3 innings, had a 2.02 ERA, 2.85 FIP, struck out 34.3% of batters. I just think that's a pretty good recipe for the Orioles pitching development to work on. So don't be surprised if Ty Weatherly kind of pops a little bit this year. And Delmarva was a little bit tougher because, like we talked about, a lot of undrafted guys from the last year and some not as highly regarded international guys. But I went with Idri Campos, who is an infielder. He's played second base, third base, shortstop, a little bit of outfield over the past season or two. He was a January 2022 amateur free agent. He's still only 19 years old, turns 20 next month, but he's had right around a league average bat last season, at least in the FCL, and then had a little bit of time in low A Delmarva, but he batted .262 with the 758 OPS in the FCL. He only struck out less than 12% of the time. So he's a guy that we've talked about this before. What you want to see from these guys is less swing and miss, more contact, less chase. Well, his swinging strike percentage went from 31.7 in 2023 all the way down to 12.7 in 2024. His contact rate went from 54% to 77%. So again, a guy who, as he got a little bit older, swung less, missed less, and I think that's a pretty good recipe.
I like him. I'm going to start with AA. Every single time in my mind, Bowie comes out, but Chesapeake. It's hard to pick a deep sleeper here with this AA roster because, I mean, it's dudes we know and a lot of veterans, and there are no sleepers on that rotation. But I'm just going to say Levi Wells just because we talked about him a lot this offseason, written about him a lot over on Substack. Just to see him only get 60 or so innings in high A last year, and that was with him missing 5 weeks with the shoulder injury, 5+ weeks with the shoulder injury. And he's got the 6.71 ERA. And you're like, why is this guy getting promoted to AA? It was a 3.78 xFIP to go along with that. The strikeout rate he was more than 11 strikeouts per 9. The walk rate, compared the walk rate pre-injury to post-injuries we've done before, is very good. The stuff is electric. Some of the top stuff plus numbers among his age group in all the minor leagues last year. Levi Wells, for the Orioles to promote him to AA, I think speaks volumes about what they think about him. So I love that move. It's one of my favorite assignments. With high A Aberdeen, I'm going to go with I changed it up here. I'm going to go a pitcher, Dominic Freeberger, only because I'm interested to see what he's going to do this year. He was also an undrafted free agent like 2 years ago. Out of UConn, he was the Big East Player of the Year as a third baseman at UConn. The Orioles signed him as a pitcher. This is a Jordy Henry guy. Orioles minor league pitching coach Jordy Henry, they work out together in the offseason. They train extensively together. So Dominic Freeberger has a lot of support here in the organization. He is from Baltimore, so he's a local kid. I don't know what high school they went to. I don't know the high schools up there to shout them out and get some extra praise there from other alumnus of those schools. But he was electric when he debuted with Delmarva and only pitched like 3 innings, and then they moved him up to high A, and then he got hurt and missed the rest of the year. But he's healthy. So, and in high A, see what stuff looks like. Excited to watch it. And then for Delmarva, I'm going to guess at this last name. I believe it's Aiken. I believe I've heard someone say Aiken. Cohen Aiken, a right-handed pitcher. He was a 14th round draft pick last year out of Lindsey Wilson College. And if you're asking, what is that? That is not a make-believe school. It is an NAIA school in Kentucky. So not D1, not D2, not D3. This is NAIA. He averaged more than 11 strikeouts per 9 in his 4 years there with just 2.6 walks per 9. So fantastic numbers regardless of the level. But then he pitched in the North Woods League last summer. So a big step up in competition facing D1 guys. 40 innings, 52 strikeouts, 9 walks. Yeah, he's also Canadian. So this is a Canadian kid from an NAIA school with massive strikeout numbers, got a $25,000 signing bonus, 6'2", big guy. I'm excited to watch him pitch. And apparently when he was in North Woods League, he was up to 94 at the fastball, mid-80 slider, a sinker, and a changeup. We'll see what this Aiken does.
So I just looked it up, and for future reference, Dominic Freeberger went to Calvert Hall for high school. So I'm sure that we have a fair number of Calvert Hall alums among our listeners. I'll go ahead and start with my deep sleeper at Bowie, and that is Preston Johnson. Johnson was drafted by the Orioles out of Mississippi State as part of their 2022 draft class in the 7th round and had 1 professional appearance, which came right after the draft in the FCL, and then missed all of 2023 after undergoing Tommy John surgery. He returned in 2024 and did not get off to a great start. In fact, his first 2 months last year at Aberdeen were pretty bad. But from the beginning of June on, he really picked up his performance and put up good numbers along the way. 1.98 ERA in 27 to third innings pitched in that span with 39 strikeouts against 14 walks. The overall stat line, owing in part to the rough start to the season as well as his high walk rate, didn't necessarily look great at Aberdeen, but nonetheless, he gets to bump up the buoy. He was one of those guys that in college where it looked like the stuff was much better than the results. And I'll be curious to see what he does with the Baysox this year now that he's further removed from the injury, because he seems like the kind of guy that could really break out. And if you want to look at another pitcher who could break out after coming off an injury, that's Wyatt Cheney, who the Orioles took in the 10th round of the 2022 draft out of junior college. Cheney had originally been at Oklahoma State, but then transferred to a junior college, Liberty Hill University, or Liberty Hill, the college. Transferred there, put up a very good season, got drafted in the 10th round by the Orioles. And what was known at the time, 95-mile-per-hour fastball, good strikeout numbers. This is 122 strikeouts, were the 8th most among pitchers in NJCAA schools that season. We did see him in Delmarva in 2023, and the results weren't great. Unfortunately, he missed all of last year because of an injury, but the Orioles must like the way that things are going in his rehab. They're going to bump him up to Aberdeen. This is a guy who was reportedly throwing 95 before the injury, so keep an eye out to see what he does. And then for my hitter, I went with another guy coming back from a series of injuries, and that's outfielder Raylan Ramos at Delmarva. Ramos made his professional debut back in 2022 and put up very solid numbers as a 17-year-old in a Dominican Summer League, posting a 109 WRC plus with 2 homers and an 8.3% walk rate in 47 games. He went to the FCL the following year, which was the first of 2 injury-shortened seasons. In fact, he's appeared in just 28 games over the last 2 years down in the FCL combined. So this could very well be a situation where Ramos is in Delmarva until someone else is ready to go, and then maybe he goes back to the FCL to start this season. But if that happens, I don't necessarily see that as a disappointment, because this is a player who's still young. He's only 20 years old, doesn't have a lot of experience in the FCL, and to be able to make the jump from the DSL to Delmarva with minimal FCL time is going to be a tough task for any player, especially when you miss as much time as he has with injuries. But when he's been healthy, he's shown a little bit of power, some possible breakout potential in that bat. And even if that scenario happens where he starts the year in Delmarva and then gets sent back to the FCL after a few weeks, I wouldn't be surprised if we see him in low A before the season ends.
Yeah, I like Ramos a lot. Yeah, he's a guy that looked great after his first season and then missed mostly last year with injuries. So very curious to see what he's got. And it's pretty good confidence boost that they're putting him all the way up to Delmarva to begin the year.
Yeah, I wrote an article in Substack after Bob did his minor league roster prediction piece. I went through that and was like, all right, well, who are my deep sleepers based on the prediction rosters? And I had Raylan Ramos just because he got a $200,000 signing bonus. He's a tall, athletic outfielder. And I know I saw what the injury was at some point. I feel like it might have been from the former Sarasota correspondent, so take that with a grain of salt. But I feel like it was like a broken leg or something that caused him to miss a big chunk of time. Maybe something else, but it was like we'll use a hockey term and just say lower body injury, I'm pretty sure. So, yeah, pretty stoked to see Raylan Ramos this year.
And with that, that does it for this week. So we will be back next week to break down the opening weekend of the full slate of minor league baseball and the latest news in Birdland as well. You're not going to want to miss that. In the meantime, you can check us out on our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, YouTube, and Blue Sky. We're also over at Substack, Orioles on the Verge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to our Patreon community and sign up to become a paying member today. For as little as $3 a month, you will have access to bonus weekly shows from Bob, Nick, and myself, as well as monthly updates to our top 50 prospects list. And as a reminder, in case you've not had a chance to listen to it yet, you actually can listen to that first weekly episode as a preview on our main podcast feed. That's a taste of what patrons are going to get throughout the season, and their episodes will be ad-free. So you check that out this week. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, part of the Believe Podcast Network.